A $500,000 Rolls Royce Cullinan rolls down Rodeo Drive, its starlight headliner glowing like 1,000 constellations. Inside, hand-stitched leather wraps every surface, bespoke wood veneers gleam under ambient lighting, and the seats adjust in 24 different ways. This isn't just a car, it's a moving palace, a status symbol that screams wealth louder than any other vehicle on Earth. Celebrities pay extra for custom paint jobs that take months to perfect. Billionaires order limited editions that cost more than most people's houses. Dictators and royals have entire fleets. But here's what makes this story absolutely insane. The man who created this ultimate symbol of luxury started life as a desperately poor boy who left school at 9 years old just to survive. He sold newspapers on freezing street corners for pennies. He went to bed hungry more nights than he could count, and yet somehow this kid with almost no education would go on to build the most prestigious automobile brand in history. This is the story of Henry Royce, the rags to riches genius who proved that obsession and relentless work can transform poverty into legend. From poverty to survival, the darkest childhood. Frederick Henry Royce was born in 1863 in Alwalton, England, the youngest of 5 children. His parents, James and Mary, ran a flour mill, except James had no business skills whatsoever. The mill barely generated profits, and for years the Royce family lived in crushing poverty. Then in 1867, everything collapsed. The family business went bankrupt. James had followed in his father's footsteps, but lacked the competence to make it work, and now they were drowning in debt with nowhere to turn. Desperate for any opportunity, the family moved to London, hoping to carve out a better life. But Henry was only 4 years old when he started his first job. A bird scare on a local farm paid 6 pence per week a 4-year-old child working in fields just so his family could eat. Let that sink in. Then in 1872, tragedy struck with devastating force. Henry's father passed away. Now all the children had to chip in to keep the family from starvation. The 9-year-old Henry began selling newspapers on street corners and delivering telegrams, making just pennies for every delivery. His childhood essentially ended before it began. He had completed only 1 year of formal schooling by the time he turned 15. Most kids his age were learning algebra and literature. Henry was learning how to survive. But even in this darkness, something remarkable was happening. Henry was obsessed with how things worked. As a young teenager, he began an apprenticeship with the Great Northern Railway Works. His aunt had offered some financial support, and despite having almost no formal education, Henry grasped every opportunity to educate himself. He studied algebra, French, and electrical engineering in his free time, teaching himself from whatever books he could find. He was driven by something deeper than ambition. It was survival instinct combined with genuine fascination. But after 3 years, the money ran out and he was forced to quit the apprenticeship. He briefly worked at a tool-making company in Leeds for 1 penny per hour, then moved to the Electric Light and Power Company in Liverpool. He worked longer and harder than everyone around him, often skipping meals to tinker with electronics. The malnutrition from his childhood, combined with years of overwork, would create health problems that plagued him for the rest of his life. The desperate gamble, starting a business with nothing. By 1882, at just 22 years old, Henry made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing to work for other people, he decided to start his own business with his fellow engineer friend Ernest Claremont. They named it F.H. Royce & Company. Here's how desperate their situation was. Henry had exactly 20 pounds to his name. The modern equivalent of maybe a few $100s, Ernest had 50 pounds. That was their entire starting capital to launch an electrical engineering company. They rented a tiny building on Cook Street in Manchester and lived in a single room above the shop. They could barely afford to eat, making the same sandwiches every single day just to survive. The odds of 2 young men with almost no money succeeding in this venture were essentially zero. Most people in their situation would have given up within months, but Henry did what he'd always done. He simply worked harder than everyone else. With everything he created, he made absolutely certain that the product was better than anything the competition offered. Finally, after endless testing and refinement, they created their first successful product, the electric doorbell. These began selling quickly, and Henry was known to stay up working through entire nights at his desk to fulfill orders. Using the money they made, Henry began creating more ambitious products, generators, and eventually even an electric crane. Every year they were in business, they created more products and their profits grew. In 1897, orders totaled 6,000 pounds. 12 months later, that jumped to 20,000 pounds. By 1899, the company's share capital reached £30,000, the modern equivalent of over $1 million, from £20 to $1 million company in 15 years. That's the power of relentless obsession with quality. But Henry was already setting his sights on something even more ambitious: automobiles. The obsession with perfection, building the perfect car. At the turn of the century, very few people owned cars. Henry Royce became one of the first in England to develop a keen interest in automobiles, purchasing a used 1901 two-cylinder French Decaville car. It was in terrible condition and wouldn't even start. But by the next day, Henry had it working, and instead of stopping there, he continually made improvements to every fault he found. Eventually, Henry decided that rather than improving this mediocre French car, he should build his own from scratch. By 1903, he had designed and built his first petrol engine. By 1904, he drove his first Royce 10-horsepower motor car. He had created 3 cars total, one for himself, one for his business partner Ernest, and a third that he sold to one of their shareholders, Henry Edmunds. It was this Henry Edmunds who would arrange the meeting that changed automotive history forever. When opposites collide, Rolls meets Royce. Charles Stuart Rolls was everything Henry Royce was not. Born in 1877 in London's affluent Berkeley Square, Charles was the youngest child of Lord and Lady Langaddock, British nobility with money, connections, and privilege. He studied mechanical engineering at Trinity College, Cambridge, and became the first undergraduate to own a motor car, having traveled to Paris at age 18 to buy a Peugeot Phaeton. While Henry had been starving and working manual labor, Charles had been racing cars and gaining a reputation for tinkering with engines, earning himself the nickname Dirty Rolls. After graduating in 1898, Charles opened one of the first car dealerships in Britain with financial support from his father. He called it C.S. Rolls and Company, importing and selling Peugeot and Minerva cars. Business was booming, and Charles used the money to fund his sporting activities. He was not only an avid motorist and racer, but also an eager aviator, both expensive hobbies. The age gap between them was significant. Charles was only 26, while Henry was 41. They came from completely different worlds. Henry Edmunds was a shareholder in Royce's company and a friend of Rolls. After buying one of Royce's cars, he began boasting to Rolls about its quality. At the time, Rolls was frustrated with only being able to sell foreign imports, so Edmunds arranged a meeting. Little did he know this meeting would change motoring forever. While Rolls had always preferred 3- and 4-cylinder cars, Royce's 2-cylinder vehicle made an immediate impression. Within minutes of seeing it, Rolls knew he had found what he was looking for. He took the car for a drive and agreed on the spot to sell as many motor cars as Royce could build. These two men made an unusual duo: massive age gap, class difference, education gap. The young Rolls had enjoyed a fancy education at prestigious Trinity College, whereas Royce's skills were largely self-taught. Would they be able to work together, building the best car in the world? The answer was yes. In December 1904, Charles Rolls and Henry Royce officially created the joint business Rolls-Royce. Each brought perfectly complementary skills. Henry had years of experience building mechanical objects to absolute perfection. Charles was an incredible businessman who knew how to harness marketing and public relations, using his connections in the upper class to find customers who could afford luxury cars. But there was also a third crucial player, Charles's business partner Claude Johnson, who took on the role of managing director. He knew it was vital to expand the company's reputation, and the publicity genius that he was, he orchestrated a series of stunts to promote the quietness and reliability of Rolls-Royce cars. One of his early advertisements promoted the car as not one of the best, but the best car in the world. That phrase would forever be associated with Rolls-Royce. In 1904, they presented their first vehicle, the Rolls-Royce 10 horsepower, selling it for £395 each, tens of thousands in today's money. They made only 16 of these cars, and if you find one today, it's worth a fortune. One sold at auction for £3.2 million in 2007. Their second vehicle was the 1906 Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. All metal parts were coated in silver and aluminum. After completing a 15,000-mile endurance run, they pulled a publicity stunt to shock audiences. They placed a cup of water on the running engine. It was so quiet it didn't spill a single drop. At the time, it was dubbed the best car in the world. As of today, the Silver Ghost is still considered one of the most valuable cars. One owner had his insured for $35 million in 2005. Tragedy and war, the dark turning point. With the growing success of the company, Charles could devote more time to flying. He eventually resigned as technical director at Rolls Royce to focus solely on planes, saying he preferred flying over driving since there are no policemen in the air. In 1909, he bought his own Wright Flyer aircraft and 1 year later set the record as the first person to make a non-stop double flight across the English Channel. The newspapers dubbed him the greatest hero of the day. But during a flying display at Bournemouth in 1910, Charles was killed in an air crash during strong winds. He was only 32 years old, becoming the first Briton to die in a plane crash. The short-lived Rolls-Royce partnership had ended tragically. Just 1 year after losing his business partner, Henry Royce's health began to decline. Years of poor eating and lack of sleep were catching up, but even when he could no longer spend days working in the factory, Henry continued working from his bedside, sketching design ideas on whatever paper he could find. During World War I, Henry was forced to do something he'd resisted for years: make aeroplane engines. In 1914, they manufactured the Rolls-Royce Eagle engine, which provided half the total horsepower for all Allied planes. This was the beginning of Rolls-Royce's legacy in aviation. The legacy: from poverty to immortality. By 1921, demand for Rolls-Royce cars was so huge there was a 3-year backlog. They opened an American factory in Springfield, Massachusetts, producing 2,944 cars within 10 years. That doesn't seem like many, but Rolls-Royce prided itself on producing the highest quality vehicles, even if it took much more time. The same is true today. Everything is still made by hand and can take up to 6 months to complete one vehicle. In 1930, Henry Royce was awarded the Order of the British Empire and was knighted as a baronet. Just 3 years later, he died at age 70. No matter how ill he felt, he never stopped working. His last drawings were literally made on his deathbed. The night before he died, he sketched an adjustable shock absorber on the back of an envelope and asked his nurse to send it to the factory. He died before the letter could be delivered. Today, Rolls-Royce remains synonymous with ultimate luxury. Currently owned by BMW, the brand produces some of the most expensive cars money can buy: the Cullinan, Ghost, Phantom, Wraith, and Dawn. With over 130 dealerships spread across 40 countries, celebrities pay extra for custom paint jobs taking months to perfect. Billionaires order limited editions costing more than houses. Dictators and royals maintain entire fleets. Waiting lists stretch for years. These cars are driven by rappers, tech moguls, oil sheiks, and monarchs, the ultimate symbol of having made it. The irony is almost poetic. A desperately poor boy who sold newspapers to survive created the car that screams wealth louder than anything else on earth. Henry Royce never lived the billionaire lifestyle his cars now represent, but his obsession with perfection, his refusal to accept mediocrity, his relentless work ethic, that's what transformed poverty into legend. In his own words, strive for perfection in everything you do. Take the best that exists and make it better. When it does not exist, design it. From rags to Rolls Royce. That's the power of never giving up.